October, marks the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. What is that one message you would love to give every business leader, every CISO, or maybe a CTO for that matter, on what they should be doing to build a security first culture?
I think security first culture is should be the goal for every CISO, but it's easier said than done. So I think the biggest thing that our CISOs can do here is as they start to build the whole security first culture, it starts from the top. The culture starts from the leader, okay, right at
No.
the top. So the CISO can move it up and make sure that the board and CEOs understand that culture, the security culture has to start from there. That's a great start.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we are joined by Jagdish Mahapatra, Managing Director at Google Cloud Security APJ, has spent decades leading at the intersection of technology, business, and human purpose. Jagdish has witnessed firsthand how innovation, resilience, and values shape lasting impact. His journey isn't just about scaling enterprises or securing clouds, it's about redefining leadership in a world where the boundaries of security, trust, and resilience are constantly shifting. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of TechDogs Discover Dialogues. Welcome to the show, Jagdish.
Thank you, Vikram.
All right, so Jagdish, let's start at the beginning. I think every leader has a story which has turning points, which has moments uh, that change perhaps how you work, how you see your team, or how you even see yourself. And you've had quite a fascinating journey. I mean, you started in early engineering roots, at L&T, then you moved on to I think now at Google, but you were at Cisco at some point, and you're heading Google Cloud Security APJ, and that's a big leap, not only across industries but across disciplines as well. So, would love for you to walk us through your journey and some of the defining moments that shaped you as a leader or a person today.
Yeah, it's going to be a deeper introspection from my side, but most of the time the reflection is when you look back and try and put that together. I feel what starts to work for you best is what's happening to you at what time of your career and people are around you when you're shaping your early formative years. I consider myself lucky to have worked in an organization like Larsen & Toubro in my early days after my engineering and being able to go through different functions because I went through a shop floor experience to a research and development lab, only to realize that all my managers felt like, no, you're cut out for sales and marketing those days. Whatever they saw, I mean, I couldn't see what they saw, and I can
Hmm.
kind of in many ways follow their instinct. But was also lucky to be part of a lot of industry transformation happening in L&T then. One of them was manufacturing offshoring, and a lot of that was really got into my playbook around on how you look to scale an idea which is internal, take it to an ecosystem and expand it. So that was,
Hmm.
I felt like, was very lucky to be at that time. I think you mentioned was Cisco. My early days in the Cisco at the time when Cisco was growing and was absolutely disrupting every market. To be able to be in a position where you're seeing through different market disruptions and scaling the business at 10x gives you a lot more fodder for your scaling templates. So yeah,
Hmm.
again, there's a lot of learning out there. We built a strong business there. I actually chose to move to pivoted to cybersecurity almost 13 years back. So I felt like
Hmm.
the infrastructure world was well consumed then, my hypothesis, and I felt like it's going to be much harder for most of these infrastructure to really stay more relevant for its consumers and customers unless they are secure by design. That's when
Hmm.
I moved to cybersecurity world. I spent some time with McAfee and in CrowdStrike, and then now I'm immensely excited about what we are in a position to really help our customers take that whole security by architecture and by foundational security, looking at all the
Hmm.
elements and help them not just manage their legacy environment, but their quick move to the whole cloud environment. So, and that's where we are very excited about what we could do at the Blue Cloud Security portfolio for our customers and even our partners.
And that's quite a journey, right? So I think you've kind of essentially witnessed how technology evolved from enabling business to becoming the business itself. uh, and like what I think is, if the last decade was about digitization, about automation, I think this decade and the future ones are really going to be about protecting uh, what we've built. And I want to talk about that now, the new reality, as we call it, of securing the cloud. And you gave him lead in some hints earlier. uh, See, the I'm just going to try and set some context here, right? I think in the last decade or so, or even so in the last 5 years post COVID, clouds become the backbone of modern businesses. Everything from data to IoT, and now even AI runs on cloud. Which also means that the threat surface has exploded. uh, there I mean there we're talking about AI agents already. I mean, we had connected devices before, we had multi-cloud environments before, but it almost seems like this entire perimeter barely exists anymore. So when everybody is kind of riding on the cloud, do you think cloud security uh, is the new parameter, or do you think that we are already living in a perimeterless world?
Yeah, I think the whole word about perimeter is, to me, I think we just should change its meaning in dictionary. Like, in the traditional enterprise view of, and particularly we went through this pandemic experience. We don't want to revisit that, but some of might have forgotten it. But it did challenge us personally. Of course, we all can talk about how it changed us, our personal values, but
Hmm.
also completely transformed the business models of most of the verticals. But there was no choice but to find a way by which you can make the whole enterprise resources accessible to all the employees while they are
Hmm.
not in the office. So they kind of really changed the whole thing. So moving to cloud is, I think, is, if you look at even the traditional industries which have really relied a lot on legacy environment, have actually
Hmm.
made a conscious decision to move a lot of their core functions onto cloud, and we continue to see tremendous cloud adoption. That's not going to stop. Now the reality is that our mental model of what we can secure, what's in our control, because we have a defined boundary of our enterprise of the past, allows us to think of security in a very traditional way. I think the
Hmm.
mental model changes immediately the moment you move to something as ephemeral as a cloud workload, which can be turned on and turned off on the fly. But when it
Hmm.
is turned on, it's capable of powerful computing service that can change the whole customer experience. But while
Hmm.
that's happening, it's exposing another new world of cyber attacks, which traditionally we haven't understood. A simple
Hmm.
example of that, Vikram, would be that in the clouds, there is something called as storage buckets.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
That's where your customer data, your own internal data is there. Lot of that is actually the new real estate for our attackers to get in. So
Hmm.
if we don't understand that, how does those storage buckets work in the cloud environment of as we start to adopt more,
Hmm.
we will leave them exposed, and that starts to really create a big attack surface. If there is one misconfiguration there, it could result in compromising a lot of credentials from cloud. That could be an attack vector for people to come
Hmm.
inside and create whatever we are seeing around on. I think a true understanding that with a real new mental model will change the way we look at security, and it's happening, right? And so that's one part. So I think this will evolve and this will become more intricate or core part of our of security.
Got
The
it.
other part you mentioned about perimeter is, gone are the days when you could just rely on your login and password to define your, eternal security. That's changing
Right.
now. So your people are using reverse proxy. I will not spend a lot of time on that, but that allows a lot of these multi-factor authentication to be compromised. So how
Correct.
can you now, s- from an architecture point of view, build zero trust into the entire experience of
Hmm.
all our employees? I think there is the whole world of how a browser can enable that. Because just imagine this: when I'm talking to each other, it's
Hmm.
actually through a browser, right? You look at that, we are. clicking on a browser that opens up a certain set of service credentials and security credentials. Imagine if the browser becomes central to the architecture and starts to define your identity posture, starts to define your zero trust policies, starts to define your DLPs that you go on, and then I'm going to add on the whole AI layer to it. This becomes foundational. So
Hmm.
this will become so critical, right? Because we are end of the day, everything that comes in as a link goes through a browser. So that starts to become a takes a very important shape as we move forward, right? But I think with AI, and I don't know how, if you're picking up what's going in the industry, there is we've heard about vibe coding, right?
Yes.
Now in the hacking world, there is a concept of vibe hacking, where the hackers can actually leverage the AI tools to manipulate emotionally how it is being consumed by
My
its
God.
users. Okay, and that basically has tremendous harm. Whether we do data poisoning and other ways, so I think that also does two things: A, the attacks are more sophisticated. B, they are in terms of its velocity, they are far more. But how do we now flip the game and make
Hmm.
sure that we are not only protecting the environment, but also using AI to protect ourselves in better. So I think that's where it turns to be an opportunity, which we will talk about more. These are all
Yeah.
new areas that we're going to be really, be exposed on as future threat landscape will start to evolve. Yeah.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that obviously there is no clear boundary anymore. Okay. Um, and I want to kind of now then bring back something that you said earlier. You mentioned this word secure by design. Uh, you know, what does this actually mean in this environment?
The first part would be that it shouldn't be an afterthought. Okay, so I think security industry for so many years has had there's a goodness in a lot of point products. I think they have done well, but I think the future has to be around on how do we get these siloed products to work on potentially a platform which can,
Hmm.
and it can be best of the breed products, but it can be one platform, but they should be able to communicate to each other. All right, so that starts to become secure by design, whether it is identity, whether it is the perimeter security, whether it is the endpoint intelligence that's coming in. Your ability
Hmm.
to put all that together into one platform that allows us to, on a real time basis, see end what is the end game are we going in security, that you have an adversary who really wants to inflict a damage on you. The damage
Hmm.
can be monetary damage, okay, which could be that I will inflict a ransomware attack, pay me the money, or we're seeing that happening around here every day. You open up and you'll see that, and that people are losing a lot of money. So
Right.
that's the other part could be if there's a sophisticated state actor coming after you, that may not be money, it could be reputational damage to the country. But if you are a
Hmm.
big brand for the country, you stand in between to be damaged because of that. So disruption and then data theft and all of that is end
Hmm.
of the day. What is the game here? They want to get in as fast, stay hidden, and come out without you noticing them as soon as they
Hmm.
can. If your architecture today of the past you put in now and it's not fast enough and it's not smart enough, the game is over in
Got
seconds. If you're actually dealing with most of the very sophisticated nation state actors around, the game is could be over in seconds.
it.
Okay,
Hmm.
your ability to look at everything around you, put that in a platform that not only can it take in all of that data of security and even non-security logs,
Hmm.
make meaning out of it, because you got to make a meaning out of it and be able to detect an attack on the fly, investigate it and remediate it on the fly before you have a loss, is where the game is shifting. And that time is shrinking.
Do you think that companies, and I'm going to talk more of the APJ market, the South Asian Indian market in that sense as well, do you think companies are over investing or under investing in security, in cloud security?
I think over investing or under investing should be seen with a bit of a little bit more context. Okay, so I think depending on where you sit in the whole, let me just qualify it. So if you look at the whole cybercrime industry today,
Hmm.
if cybercrime was to be economy by itself, it would be the third largest economy in the world. Third largest. So it's a very lucrative business for the bad actors to really
Hmm.
be doing what they're doing because the returns are very high.
True,
Okay.
true.
So from that point of view, Whether you're investing more or less is a very relative answer. The question is, I think what organizations have to really understand is what risks are they willing to live with, and what assets they cannot
Hmm.
live with any risk, because that would completely bring their business down. I think their ability to look at risk elimination or risk reduction, I'm sorry, if you can reduce the risk, and if the whole pursuit in your investment, whether it is technology, people, or process, or partners, is to
Hmm.
reduce risk, because you can't eliminate the risk. So from that point of view, I think there's a lot more we can do there, only because the puck is moving to the cloud, puck is moving to to AI. And like you
Hmm.
mentioned, there is not a single day of my life that I'm not creating an agent. Just to give you an example, that'll give a little context even to the listeners, is I needed to write a submission letter to one of the visa offices of a country for my
Hmm.
daughter. And she is in US. She sent me a message in the morning, can you draft me one? And I went to Gemini and it created a letter for me on the fly. Think that would have taken me at least 30 minutes to think through all of that. It could pick up
Absolutely.
the address of the visa in New York of that country, build all that up and give it to me. All I have to do is, hey, just print and sign and give. Now, I'm
Hmm.
also creating agents every day to really make me more productive. That's the world we're living in. But these agents are also going to be another attack surface for our. So when organizations are embracing AI, they got to
Hmm.
really look at saying, what kind of investments are you doing to make it secure by design? And that will define whether you're underinvested or overinvested. All right.
Hmm.
Because if we don't take care of that, the attack surface is going to get. But if you leverage security there, that becomes your a strength for us to really thwart all the attacks that will come our way.
So obviously, October, marks the Cyber Security Awareness Month. And on that note, I have actually two questions, right? So first is, what is that one message you would love to give every business leader, every CISO, or maybe a CTO for that matter, uh, on what they should be doing to build a security first culture? That is the first. And on that note itself, the second question is, uh, where do you think in the next 5 years from now cloud security will look like? Do you think a lot of the things that we are doing today will be outdated? And I want to kind of contextualize in the context of, or sorry, given the fact that it is a cybersecurity awareness month.
Let's just address the first part. I think security first culture is should be the goal for every CISO, but it's easier said than done. So I think the
Hmm.
biggest thing that our CISOs can do here is, as they start to build the whole security first culture, it starts from the top. Okay.
Hmm.
I remember, I'm going to give you a little personal context. Whenever as a child I used to go with my father to buy fish from the market, he used to always lift the head and check it's a fish's flesh or
Fresh.
not,
Yeah.
because the fish always rots from the head. And so I think, to me, the culture starts from the leader, okay, right at the top. So the CISO can move it up and make sure that the board and CEOs understand that culture, the security culture has to start from there. That's a great
Hmm.
start, because then it starts to align business priorities with security by design and security at the core of the business expansion plans. It makes a lot of difference when leaders walk the talk, because the employees start to really align there and they don't
Hmm.
do things. We all need to move fast, but not at the cost of exposing the business to the risk, right? I think that's one part CISOs can do well. As vendors, as providers, as partners, our job is to give them template that they can translate a technology benefit or an outcome to an economic driver. Because at the end of the day, it must translate to a CFO language, it must
Hmm.
translate to a CEO language, and that's always our pursuit. That how do we give them a language that helps the CISO to be so? So that's one part.
Hmm.
I think the other part which is undermined is how prepared are we? And a lot of that preparation comes out of how much of practice are we doing. So we grew up saying practice makes us perfect, but
Hmm.
I don't pursue perfection, because that's something, what is perfect for you may not be perfect for me, and vice versa. I think what practice does is makes it permanent. And I think some of the permanent muscle memory skills of security can only
Hmm.
come out how much we practice it, how much of red teaming, purple teaming are we doing? How much of tabletop access are we doing? How much of awareness are we doing from a point of view of checking, are our
Hmm.
employees still susceptible? I think that prepares us when there is an attack. And finally, when there is an attack, you really need to be on top of how will you handle not just the cyber attack, how are you going to handle your against the threat, but how will
Hmm.
you communicate? to external stakeholders or your internal stakeholders, a lot of that damage comes out of a bad handling of I'm going to say PR, but crisis communication. So
Hmm.
combining all that together, I think for a CISO is important, and that will not happen alone. So having great partners, great consulting partners, right? Like,
Hmm.
of course, I'll always say Google as a great partner there. Mandiant as a great one of our strong service partners, using Mandiant sort of capabilities, keeping
Hmm.
them as part of the whole, as part of the team will make a lot of difference. Second question is interesting, and I'm always careful when we talk about future because, hey, I mean,
Hmm.
if we had asked something 5 years back and I'd answered, it sounds very silly. But if I were to really bet on something, as we talked about in the earlier, I was talking about how agents are part of our life now. I
Correct.
think we are at a stage where we are starting to build the agents, and I think it is just the start. 2025 is here when agent builds outs are happening. Will the
Hmm.
agents then start to move? What is the end? What is the end game with the agents? They're going to make a lot of our tasks
Hmm.
fully autonomous. Aren't they yet right now? No. So maybe some of them are early levels. Go to semi-autonomous level and then go to autonomous level, right?
Hmm.
I think for the next foreseeable future, we will actually embrace a world where humans and agents have to collaborate. So to me, the future of security
Hmm.
and work will be human agent collaboration. And if I were to take that concept to security world, what we do in Google Cloud Security, we have a concept of security operation SecOps solution. Basically, what it does is, I was telling you, right, you put all that data of your enterprise into one platform, then you have
Hmm.
to really use that to help you make decisions on the fly. It won't happen if the scale is not at a cloud scale. Okay, it's got to be at the highest scale and the speed. But it also should leverage then these agents. Now imagine these agents coming in, taking on a
Hmm.
full task out of you, and ability to find a vulnerability on the fly. Like this RSA. Are you familiar with RSA event in
No, please, by all means,
yeah,
would love to.
it's one of the trademark events that happen in the security world globally. Last RSA, we unleashed an agent through DeepMind Labs of Google called Big Sleep. What Big Sleep did was it on the fly found out vulnerabilities in a certain software which was not detectable by humans. Now, what it
Hmm.
does is
Interesting.
you pick up those vulnerabilities before it's detectable and then use that to patch your environment. It just allows you to be, flip that game. Because security world has always been a asymmetric warfare. Okay. And I'm just using warfare as a metaphor. So, the attackers always had the advantage of knowing more about us to the target, and they need to succeed once. For a
Hmm.
defender, you really have to fail once and then it's game over, right? So it's always been asymmetric warfare. I think this whole agentic world that we're getting into our SOC environment will first time give a power back to the defenders, and there is an
Hmm.
opportunity for
Nice.
us to flip that game. And if we can do that, the organization that will learn to collaborate, where humans and agents can collaborate and agents can help us get our security back into the game, will be more secure.
And just to follow up on that, right? So, how do you think organizations can then prepare for this AI agentic led automation? And the kind of intelligence that you're going to get because of these agents, because they are able to map vulnerabilities, like you said, and then the entire unpredictability that comes because of this. How do you think organizations can prepare for it?
Firstly, by not resisting the change. So one of the things I've always believed that when you start to be um, trying to deny something or not be in a state of denial that this is not going to happen to me, because I think in our world it is not about if but about when. Okay,
Hmm.
about the cyber attacks. So I think accepting the fact that you will be on the target of some adversary sometime, because you might just you might just create adversaries for whatever the reasons may be, is to first
Hmm.
be ready for it. Understand that since you're embracing AI into the model, which is not a choice anymore, because that's a competitive world. I mean, everybody's doing it. So you got to be really using that to become a better provider for your customers.
Hmm.
Understanding that is the first part. And then making sure I'm going to go back by secure by design. So you're using AI tools from all the providers. Are they secure by design or not? Question
Hmm.
the vendors right up there. This is an opportunity for us to do what didn't happen in internet and the early, because internet was never designed to be secure. Internet
Hmm.
had always had the flavor of convenience then, because no one is thinking of that. Now at least we have learned that we can't do the same as you get AI, right? So I think if those elements are taken care of, it's important then to have the humility to say you can't solve it on your own. So let me
Hmm.
have the right technology provider. Let me have the right managed services provider. Let me right the right kind of consulting arm which can really tell me about how to do incident response or do
Hmm.
a red teaming, purple teaming for me so that I'm ready for those. Culmination of all of that will be important, right? If you can organization that will do that holistically, we will definitely reduce their risk, not eliminate the risk. You can still never eliminate the risk.
So Jagdish, obviously you've given us a rich perspective on where the whole cloud security world is at the moment. How AI agents and humans will obviously work together in the future. And like you said, they'll be faster. They'll be smarter together. They'll be more connected together. Uh, and behind all of this, like you said, organizations need to accept this change. And one of the ways they would best be able to do that is through that example of the fish that you gave, right? So it's the leaders at the top who need to embrace this change. And maybe perhaps they will have to take those tough calls. And for the better part of it, I believe they will be under immense pressure always. So I want to kind of talk about the leadership that drives cybersecurity forward now. And see, I don't think leadership is about managing tools and people, and partly yes, but it's also about managing uncertainty and ambiguity. Because in this world, like you said, if there is vibe coding, there is vibe hacking, and things can go wrong very very fast. I think you talked about ransomware attacks, and you also talked about state-sponsored threats. In my opinion, it's the leader who will define the outcome. Okay, so in your opinion, what are some of the leadership qualities that really separate other leaders from the rest? I want to talk about CISO, CTOs, CEOs, the entire leadership circle. What are those qualities that separate the rest from the best?
I'm not the authority to speak about this. You're asking the CTOs who are done well. From my experience of having met so many CTOs and so many CEOs and CIOs, the ones who have done well have actually made sure that the agenda of security is well understood by all the stakeholders. So they have done a good job of taking the whole leadership together. So
Hmm.
they haven't made it an individual sport. They made it a team sport. And the moment they made it a football game or a large cricket game, it starts to become responsibility for every 11 players in there to really contribute, which I think
Correct.
has been a recipe of most people. And I know of CISOs who have really at the beginning made it very clear about that we cannot eliminate risk. I like that. I mean, because that's one thing that people should know. I mean, there are times when CFOs they write a check and they feel, okay, I've given you this the power to buy this much security. Now I can sleep peacefully. No, you can't, because there
Hmm.
is no end game in security. It's a journey. What was risky yesterday may not be risky today, but there could be new forms of risk that could come in. So this whole cycle of constantly creating and destroying the past and creating, in our parlance of this whole creation to destruction cycle, but taking all of them together
Together.
are where I found the best of the guys have done, best of the leaders have done well.
And that's quite powerful, right? So it's not only about doing it, but it's doing it together, being prepared for it, have that mindset, not operate out of a checklist maybe. And there's something that I've heard you speak before. It's about uh, more specifically, faith, well-being, the inner strength that individuals need to have. And I don't think that's been spoken in boardrooms or conversations in business for the longest time. And that's a very different perspective or value system or a belief system that you bring. I would love to understand, how do they guide you or influence you to work with, or lead with these teams in such high stress and high pressure environments today?
I personally don't think it's high stress because the stress is internal. Okay, the external environment is not going to go away. So sometimes as you start to evolve, and I think with age and experience, we start to internalize this better. Sometimes
Hmm.
and different stages of your career, you start to take some of these things better. But I think one of the things what I've felt makes a lot of difference is how consistent we are. So you talked about faith. I would say trust. Okay, think the trust comes in with consistency, because what consistency does is, whatever you are, I mean, your form of leadership, you're consistent with that with every stakeholder. That
Hmm.
starts to create a lot of trust, saying, okay, you know what, this is what Jack stands for. This is what Mr. A stands for. And if he's expecting or she's expecting these five metrics that are important for the business, again, we all understand that well, it aligns to our goals, it doesn't surprise people. Because when people change and not consistent with everything, how you show
Hmm.
up in a meeting, how are you on time, how do you close your meetings, how are you empowering the team, all that consistency is where to me is the foundational to all the values. I think the second part about well-being point is very, very personal to me, because I think unlike our parents and our grandparents, Vikram, we will all live decades longer than them. So
Hmm.
our ability to think about lifespan versus health span is an important part. That we probably have not just a longer lifespan, but are we doing enough for ourselves that our health span also increases? Okay,
Hmm.
because we might be working longer than they have. Well, we can decide how the stress level is more or less, but it's not going to go away. And we are 24 by 7 connected. Looking at all that, I think the whole mental um strength around on, are we sleeping well? Are we
Hmm.
eating right? Are we looking after our body? This is the only thing we've got. This is the only thing God has given us as a package. But some of
Hmm.
those things that we can get better at will also translate into energy back at the work. Okay, so I always say that people, when you have a bad day, just don't turn up at office that day. Take a day off, because
Hmm.
let that things settle down in and come in, because we come to a workplace, virtual or real, we are giving informally or intentionally or unintentionally, we're passing some energy. There is some calories, joules, watts,
Hmm. True.
sick day.
Yeah.
Can we make sure that it's positive, and because it will come out of a culmination of a healthy body and a healthy mind?
And I think one of the things that also kind of separates leaders, while we are talking about the importance of faith and well-being, and obviously the unseen strengths of individuals, is how outcome focused you are as against features. And I want to kind of talk about that a little with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been in sales and business for last 30 years now, and I think one of the biggest testing time for anybody who comes and meets me, as I'm always looking at myself as a customer, saying what connects for me, whether I'm at a restaurant and someone is really trying to suggest something back to me, or I'm buying something online, or I'm getting to a store,
Hmm.
is our ability to tell stories that connect. And that is true for security world, tech world, or any world. And I'll give you a few examples of that as a customer, because do a sales is something for others to judge. But I think what, and I take a lot of inspiration. A pretty simple thing: you go to a gourmet place, a nice restaurant, and and the person is trying to explain to you all the ingredients and everything else.
Hmm.
But end of the day, what stays in your mind why you like something is not because of the ingredients, but how that whole experience of that,
Experience, yeah, how it made you feel. Yeah.
how it made you feel. And so you remember that, not the ingredients. And that's an example of saying, if you focus a lot on features
Hmm.
and not really the outcome and the problems we can solve, it takes away the whole part. You might have the best technology, doesn't mean much. I think I
Hmm.
derive a lot of that. There are times you walk into a store, you don't even want to buy one jacket, but because of the person there, the way he articulates a story around on what it means to you, and brings out things that actually
Hmm.
connects with you as your personality, you might end up buying more. You might have done that. So and I think as all of us, we are, end of the day, I believe all of us here in the business of selling. We are in, or rather,
True.
I would say, we're in the business of persuasion. We have to persuade someone to make a decision that we want them to make when they have a choice of doing something else. Okay, and that's why the art of persuasion comes from our ability to tell more stories that connect here rather
Hmm.
than. And I think people will always remember that connects here than here. I think that's the journey. If as salespeople can we move from here to here, we will be in a long term less stressed about the job. And that's why some sales guys enjoy the quarters, the quarter ends, all because they're telling.
And honestly, Jagdish, I think this has been such a refreshing perspective on, that, especially the last segment, because it kind of reminds me some of the things that I kind of have in my belief system, and it also kind of reiterates to me and my audiences perhaps that it's leadership is not only about resilience, but it's also about reflection. And a true leader reflects a lot. And I think that came across very strongly today in our conversation, because I think you were very reflective through your journey, through your lessons that you've learned across. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate this. And now, before we wrap up, I want to kind of lighten things up a bit. We covered agentic AI, we covered cloud security, we talked about leadership. I want to now get to know the person behind it all. Coming up next is our quick fire round, rapid fire round, as we call it. So I want like short, spontaneous answers. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll go for it. Great. All right. So first things that come to your mind, no overthinking, Jagdish. What's that one book that influenced you the most today?
Short answers, actually two. The old classic that I've always liked is a book by James Allen called As a Man Thinketh. It's about the growth mindset. But the one that has always resonated with me, and I wish I had written that, is called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
That is on my read list. I am currently reading the Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Holtz, and it's a fantastic read. If you haven't read it, I would urge you to read it. I think perhaps at your level, you know a lot of it already. I also thought some of the things probably we are actioning it personally as well, but then it was just too nice to see them somewhere put out there. So definitely will try and read the Atomic Habits. Second, are you a tea person or a coffee person to start your day?
I travel a lot, Vikram. So when I'm traveling, it's coffee works easier, okay? Because it's
Yeah,
easier.
absolutely.
If I'm home, I like to make my own tea with all the spices because I like
Oh,
the whole
nice.
combination of spices, and that's very personal to me. If I'm home, it's always tea.
All right. So, without being too controversial, I mean, if you're traveling around, it's better to stick with coffee because I don't think you'll get the best tea outside India. If you want in tech and you want in security, what career would you have pursued?
Always joke around about this. I would have wanted to be in music, a singer, a musician, and couldn't pursue that. But in last few years, I've picked up my lessons on piano and drums, and hopefully, I can make some trashy
Fantastic.
music someday. But I mean, that's one part of me that really feels like, yeah, I mean, that would have been. Well, you don't know.
Fantastic. I keep forgetting the name of an individual. He's the CEO slash MD of a public listed company, and he's a DJ. He's a well-known DJ. Perhaps we could at some point see you, jamming on the guitar or on the drum someday. But look forward to it. A movie or a show that you can watch and repeat.
A show that's hit me hard from day one and stayed on that the interest stayed till all the seasons was Breaking Bad. If you watch Breaking Bad from the start shot to how it opens up with
Yeah,
Bryan Cranston shot to the whole piece, it just so still I think it's one of the best. There are many other that come to my mind, but the movie actually I should mention a movie. Last night I ended up sleeping a little late because I watched it again incidentally. It's called Guide. I don't know if
oh,
you watched
nice.
Devanand or not, and it's the whole journey of the protagonist. And I don't know if you read Joseph Campbell's the hero's journey. It'll give you a whole picture around on how the protagonist goes from where it falls and rises because of all the wrong reasons and then becomes a hero not by accident and then has to
Hmm.
live up to that expectation. So I loved it, and that's why I was a little sleepless last night. It just I still love that movie.
All right. So, on that note, are you a early morning thinker or a late night problem solver?
I think early morning.
The best piece of advice you ever received?
I think most people have. I've had great people helping me at my formative days. I consider that myself to be very lucky. But I
Hmm.
think the best advice I get a lot of my best advice from my partner, life partner. So I'm lucky to have her constantly looking at areas that I don't do well because that's so important to get that feedback. I think one of the things I'm working well, which I think we should now imbibe from women, the women leaders in around us, is our ability to have more compassionate. So if you can translate your passion that's inside us, if you're born with that, but just put the capsule of compassion to it, because then we can take everybody, all of us together. So I get a lot of that advice from her constantly, and I work on that.
I think that's great advice, and I'm glad you brought this up because I think all of us need to kind of embrace a little more compassion. And we are living in a world which is a lot, getting weirder by the day, to be honest. But I think compassion will help us all. Okay, what's your go-to method to unwind after a long day?
Long day or not, not a single day of mine goes without. I've been on the fitness regime for a while, so I mix it up. I've had a trainer for a long, so I don't miss that. Try not miss that at least five days of the week, and I definitely make sure that I read something. Well, it could be a book, could be an article. So I definitely want to make sure my reading is on, because it's the only way you learn different ways and different worlds.
Do you prefer mountains or beaches?
I think it'll be more mountains. I love the whole experience of going up.
One gadget you can't live without.
Phone. There is no phone. Really.
All right. What's your comfort food?
Homemade. Anything that's simple.
And before we let you, just last two ones. A city that always inspires you.
Many around. Are you talking about APJ or globally?
Globally, anything that comes to your
So
mind.
many,
A
so many
city that.
cities. It's very unfair to pick on one. I mean, I love in the region. You got Sydney, Tokyo, Taipei. I love that. Of course, back I'm from Mumbai. It's got gives us different energy. But
Hmm.
if you look at Vienna, I would love to. And I've lived around in. I love the vibe of the valley as well. If you've ever lived there, so I think it's difficult to pick one. I'm going to break hearts if I pick one city. To be frank here.
Okay. All right. So one last one before we let you go. What's the most scenic place that you've ever traveled to?
I think the standout thing that comes to me is a place called Česky in Czech. Česky is the whole town is a UNESCO heritage town. If you ever get to
Hmm.
get there, you have to go from Prague and get to Česky, and the whole town is just beautiful. There are microbreweries. There's just a vibe of you feel like everything around you looks like unreal. So yeah, Česky has been a very interesting, very surprising experience.
I'm going to put that on my bucket list. All right. So, Jagdish, on that note, this brings us to the end of this, conversation. It's been a fascinating conversation. I love the fact that you were reflective, refreshing. We've covered a lot of things, to your vision of, where cloud security might look like in the next 5 years. What leadership advice would you give to the CISOs? I honestly thought that you are one of those rare individuals that is able to connect technology with that human clarity, and also to add to that the compassion angle that you brought in at a later point. So a rare mix. I think something that we can all take away from. So thank you once again for joining us on Discover Dialogues. Really appreciate it. Any parting words?
Oh, thank you, Vikram, for having me over. I had a great time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.